She almost dropped the microphone when she saw his face. The man walking down that grand staircase, adjusting his cufflinks, smiling at a room full of people who adored him, was the same man who had kissed her forehead 3 days ago and whispered that she was his whole world. The same man who had her father's house signed over as collateral at the bank. The same man who was currently holding the hand of a billionaire's daughter. Jade didn't move. She didn't scream. She just stood at that microphone, in her black performance dress, and watched the man she was supposed to marry descend a staircase toward another woman's future. And the worst part? She wasn't even supposed to be here tonight. If you have ever given someone everything, your trust, your savings, the last thing your family left behind, and watch them use it as a stepping stone to someone better, this story will find you in a place that doesn't heal fast. Stay with us, because what happened inside that ballroom didn't just expose one man. It destroyed an entire operation built on borrowed names and stolen lives. And the woman standing at the center of it, microphone in hand, heart in pieces, was about to make a decision that couldn't be taken back. Drop your city in the comments right now. We genuinely want to know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're new here, subscribe before this story ends, because you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Now let's go back. 8 weeks before that staircase. 8 weeks before everything. It was a Tuesday night when Nate got down on one knee. No restaurant. No crowd. Just Jade's small apartment. A grocery store bouquet of white daisies, her favorite. He had remembered without ever being reminded. And a ring with a thin silver band and a tiny sapphire at the center. Not a diamond. Because years ago, in a conversation she barely remembered, she had mentioned once that diamonds felt like performance. Sapphires felt like sincerity. He had held onto that. She said yes before she finished reading his face. She called her younger sister, Priya, immediately after, crying so hard she had to put the phone on speaker because she couldn't hold it steady. They had been together long enough that Jade had stopped imagining a version of her life where he wasn't in it. The proposal didn't feel like a surprise. Felt like arrival. Like something that had always been coming finally walking through the door. She had no idea it was the opening move of a game. 3 weeks after that proposal, Nate sat across from her at her kitchen table with a look she would later recognize as rehearsed calm. He told her about a private investment window closing in 72 hours. High entry threshold, massive return, the kind of opportunity that didn't come twice. He said he had already committed everything he had and still needed more to meet the minimum. He reminded her gently that they were practically married. He held both her hands across the table, steady, no tremor, not even a blink out of place, and told her the house would never actually be at risk because the deal would close in 60 days, well before any bank deadline could threaten anything. Jade sat with it for 4 days. She turned it over alone, the way she always handled the heavy things. And she kept arriving at the same answer. She had trusted this man through everything. He had never once given her a reason to doubt him. Not once. So she went to the bank. She used her father's house as collateral. She transferred $64,000 into the account Nate had given her. He kissed her temple and said, "You just secured our future." 2 days later, he left for what he called a development summit. He called every morning. He texted every night. He asked about Priya. He remembered small things she mentioned in passing. Everything felt completely normal because he was exceptionally good at making normal feel like proof. The calls weren't love. She just didn't know that yet. The calls were maintenance. On the morning of the engagement ball, Jade got a call from Marcus. From Trisha. Her event coordinator contact, a woman she had worked with for 3 years. A woman who had always been straight with her. The original vocalist for a private event at the Harlow Grand had been in a car accident 4 days earlier. Trisha needed a replacement by 6 o'clock that evening. The client was Preston Aldridge, one of the top 5 real estate developers in the state. A name that opened doors and closed others. The performance fee was $3,500. Jade said yes before Trisha finished the sentence. She spent the afternoon pressing her black dress and curling her hair. She tried to call Nate to share the news. He didn't pick up. She texted. For minutes later, a reply came through. Warm, brief, perfectly timed. Baby. Tomorrow is the biggest meeting of my life. I might be unreachable all day, but I'm so proud of you. Go show them." She smiled at the screen. She wrote back, "Go get it. I love you." Then she drove to the Harlow Grand and walked in through the side entrance, thinking about nothing except her opening song. The Harlow Grand was everything its reputation had promised. 40-foot ceilings, marble floors that caught the chandelier light and threw it back doubled. White orchids in floor-length gold vases lining every table. The kind of room where even the silence felt expensive. Jade found the stage setup, confirmed with the sound technician, reviewed her set list, and looked out over the filling room. Something settled in her chest that had been tight for weeks. The stage had always been the one place where everything else went quiet. No debt, no waiting, no questions that didn't have answers yet. Just her voice and a room full of people ready to receive it. She adjusted the microphone stand and watched the guests arrive in formal wear, and for a few minutes she was simply content. At 7:41, the double doors at the top of the main staircase opened. The room fell quiet. The host announced the entrance of the evening's honored couple. Jade raised her microphone. Then her eyes found the staircase, and her body stopped working. He was wearing a deep navy tuxedo. His hair was groomed exactly the way she had always known it. He was using the wide public smile, not the private one she had spent years collecting. And beside him, her hand resting in the crook of his elbow, was Kendall Aldridge, Preston Aldridge's daughter. Young, radiant, ivory gown, auburn hair pinned up at the neck, completely unaware that the woman hired to perform at her engagement party was the woman her fiancé had proposed to 8 weeks earlier. The ballroom erupted in applause. Preston Aldridge beamed from the front table. Kendall glowed, and Nate walked his future bride down that staircase without once looking toward the stage. Then he did. Their eyes met across the full width of the room. His smile didn't fall dramatically. It simply stopped, switched off. What replaced it wasn't guilt, wasn't panic. It was something colder and faster than either of those things. A calculation. She could almost see it moving behind his eyes. The rapid scan for exits, the assessment of damage, the search for the fastest version of a story that kept him standing. And Jade, standing at that microphone with $64,000 of her dead father's legacy sitting in this man's bank account, felt something shift inside her that had nothing to do with heartbreak. It was clarity, total, sharp, and completely without mercy. She did not cry. She did not leave. The thing about a woman who has spent years holding everything together is that when the ground disappears, she does not fall. She stands on the air, and she decides. As Nate and Kendall reached the center platform and the host gestured toward Jade to begin, she stepped forward. The room settled into expecting quiet. Into the microphone in a voice that did not shake. "Not one syllable of it," she said. "Before this evening continues, I need to say something to everyone in this room." The applause died instantly. Kendall frowned. Preston Aldridge set down his glass with quiet precision, the way a man does when he has learned over decades to pay attention to unexpected silences. Nate's jaw held its position, but his eyes were still running that calculation, still searching for the door. "The man standing on that platform," Jade said, "proposed to me 2 months ago." She raised her left hand. The ring was still on her finger. "He gave me this ring. He told me we were building a future together. And then he asked me to take out a $64,000 loan using my family's home as collateral for what he called a private investment opportunity." She paused. "I did it because I trusted him completely. There is no investment. There never was. And I am standing in this room tonight only because the original singer was in a car accident and I was called as a last-minute replacement. That is how close this came to never coming out at all." The silence that followed was the kind that physically breaks something in a room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A packed ballroom held its breath for full seconds. Nate broke it. He laughed, short, controlled, the polished laugh of a man who had talked his way out of difficult rooms before. He looked at Preston Aldridge with practiced ease and said, "She developed a fixation after we ended things. I'm sorry for this disruption. Security can. I have the bank transfer receipts. Jade reached into her performance bag. The bag that, 3 weeks earlier, on a sleepless night when something she couldn't name had finally pushed her past waiting, she had packed with every document, every screenshot, every voice memo she had quietly been collecting without fully letting herself understand why. I have 38 text messages, including the night of the proposal. I have a voice recording of him explaining the loan and confirming the collateral. I have the engagement photos. I have all of it. She looked directly at Kendall. Not with cruelty. With the specific, quiet honesty of a woman who had nothing left to lose, speaking to a woman who still had everything left to protect. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here because I almost lost my father's house. And I think the Aldridge family deserves to know what kind of man they're about to permanently invite into their lives. Kendall looked back at her. In that look was the rapid internal reckoning of a woman whose instincts had been sending her signals she had chosen not to fully examine, until this exact moment made examination unavoidable. Kendall turned to Nate. Her voice was low, completely controlled. Is this true? Nate opened his mouth. She said, "Do not manage me right now. Is this true?" He said nothing. The silence answered for him in a way no words could have walked back. Preston Aldridge was already on his phone. His legal team. His private investigator. A man who was apparently never more than one call away. Because Preston Aldridge had built his entire career in an industry where due diligence wasn't optional and surprises weren't tolerated. Within 30 minutes, the picture that emerged wasn't just damaging. It was devastating. The financial advisory firm Nate had registered under when he first approached the Aldridge family did not exist at any verifiable address. It was a shell, a name, a letterhead, a website built to survive exactly the level of scrutiny a wealthy family would apply before allowing a man near their daughter. And not one layer deeper. The investment portfolio he had presented during his courtship of Kendall couldn't be traced to any real institution. The figures were fabricated. The credentials were fabricated. The car he had arrived in tonight was a rental. The watch on his wrist had been purchased 12 days earlier. The apartment he had listed as his home address was a furnished short-term rental, paid month to month. No long-term lease, no property ownership, no wealth, only the performance of it. Sustained, detailed, and specifically calibrated to pass the inspection of people who believed they already knew what to look for. And then the investigators found something worse. Nate had not encountered the Aldridge family by accident. He had researched them deliberately, specifically, over a period of months before arranging a single introduction. He had studied Preston Aldridge's business structure, his estate planning, his known generosity toward family, and the publicly available details of Kendall's position as his primary heir. He had mapped the inheritance. He had calculated the timeline. He had identified the fastest route from first introduction to marriage to access. And then he had executed it with the patience of someone who had studied the target long before making a single move. This was not opportunism. This was a campaign. Nate had not fallen for Kendall Aldridge. He had selected her. And the $64,000 he had taken from Jade, the woman he had spent years carefully building trust with, had funded the wardrobe, the rental car, the short-term apartment, and the fabricated lifestyle that made him appear to a billionaire's family like a man worth trusting. Jade's money had paid for the costume he wore to steal someone else's inheritance. Think about what that meant for Kendall. Standing in that ballroom, in the gown she had chosen for the happiest night of her life, surrounded by family and friends and photographers, realizing that every dinner, every gesture, every conversation had been a measurement, not of her proximity to her father's wealth, of how long it would take to move from engagement to access, and that the only reason she was finding out now, instead of years from now when it would have been infinitely harder to undo, was because a singer got into a car accident 4 days ago. Kendall Aldridge removed her engagement ring. She did not throw it. She set it on the platform beside her, gently, with a deliberateness that was somehow more final than any dramatic gesture could have been. Then she stepped back. And for one moment, just one moment in the middle of all of it, she and Jade looked at each other across the room. Two women who had given real things to the same man's fiction. One had given her savings and her trust. The other had nearly given her entire future. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Nate was removed from the building by security. He said things on the way out, directed at Jade, directed at the room. But the phones were already recording, already uploading. The words didn't matter anymore. The footage of a woman in a black dress standing calmly at a microphone in a chandelier-lit ballroom, telling the truth in front of everyone, was already moving through the world faster than he could run. The legal consequences came quickly and from every direction at once. Preston Aldridge filed a civil fraud complaint within 48 hours, not only for the financial deception, but specifically for the calculated targeting of his family's estate. The complaint argued, and investigators confirmed, that Nate's conduct constituted deliberate predatory fraud, that he had researched, planned, and executed a scheme designed to infiltrate a wealthy family through romantic deception for the purpose of financial extraction. This was not a man who had lied about his background to impress someone he liked. This was a man who had treated a family's inheritance as a target, and their daughter as a vehicle. The civil complaint was extensive, precise, and entirely supported by the documentation Jade had handed over. Jade filed her own separate lawsuit the same week, supported by a pro bono attorney who had seen the story break on local news and reached out within hours. Criminal charges followed. Investigators working across both cases confirmed that Nate had operated variations of this scheme before. Different cities, different names, different women, same architecture. Find someone with deep trust and limited resources. Build credibility over time. Create urgency around a financial opportunity. Extract the funds. Use those funds to construct a more convincing version of yourself for a wealthier target. The pattern was documented and provable, and it had left a trail across state lines that federal investigators were extremely interested in. The charges included wire fraud, identity fraud, financial deception, and conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud, the last of which carried the heaviest sentence. He was convicted on all counts. 9 years in federal prison. He would serve every single one. Jade recovered the full $64,000 through the civil settlement. The house on Calloway Street, her father's house, the one she had signed over in terror on a Tuesday morning with shaking hands, was never touched. The bank was repaid. The debt was gone. And Priya, who had never known how close they had come to losing the only thing their father had left them, sat across the kitchen table from her sister one evening and asked why Jade was crying while she was smiling. Jade told her everything. Priya reached across the table and held her hand and didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Dad would have been so proud of you." And Jade believed her completely. In the months that followed, the world found Jade the way it finds people who do something honest in a room full of witnesses. The performance bookings multiplied. Invitations came from venues she had only ever driven past. A regional music showcase. A licensing deal for a recording she had made 2 years earlier and nearly forgotten about. Features in publications she had admired from a distance for years. None of it arrived as one sudden wave. It built the way real things build. Gradually, steadily, one room at a time, earned by someone who had been doing the work long before anyone was paying attention. 10 months after the Harlow Grand, Jade stood at the microphone of her first headline concert. 250 people. Her name on the marquee outside. Priya in the front row, wearing the earrings their mother had left them, already crying before the first song started. Jade looked out at the room. All those faces, all that light. And before she sang a single note, she said, "I used to think the stage was where I came to escape the hard things. Now I know it's where I come to prove they didn't win." The applause that followed filled the room from the floor up. The house on Calloway Street is still there, still hers. The lights are on. The door is unlocked. And somewhere in that house, there is a kitchen table where two sisters still sit together at the end of long days and talk until the food goes cold. Some people move through this world taking. Some people move through it building. The difference is always visible in the end. It just sometimes takes a ballroom, a last-minute phone call, and a woman who refused to go quiet to make it visible to everyone at the same time.